The race is on, and the wraps came off the Audi F1 team at its launch in Berlin on the same day Honda presented its new power unit in Tokyo. But what did we learn from these two launch events as we edge ever closer to the start of pre-season testing? I'm Edd Straw, and joining me to tell all is first Val Khorounzhiy, and later Scott Mitchell-Malm. Well, it's been a very busy day for Formula One, not only the Honda launch and the Audi launch, but also the Racing Bulls. The V-Carbo 3 has been shaken down at Imola as well. Head to the race website to take a look at that. But for now, we're focused on Audi. And Val Khorounzhiy, you are there at what sounds like a real party.
It is a real party, I guess, because I've had to go downstairs from where the party's at to record this bit, and I'm also not really the partying type. What I can tell you is this place is the Kraftwerk in Berlin, which translates to power plant and used to be a power plant in the middle of Berlin and is now just, I guess, a hangout place. Somebody mentioned during the presentation, one of the other journalists, that it's like the nightclub scene in John Wick 4. And then I looked it up, and it is actually that exact same location for anybody who's enjoying that. But it's a really interesting but kind of incongruous launch event where all the team people are coming in and saying, look, 2026, we're not expecting massive things. We're not expecting a huge result. It's all about the processes we're putting in place. It's all about the development of the project. And then obviously, while they unveil this livery on the show car, which is very similar to the livery they've already unveiled. So in fact, they've basically done two liveries, one slightly sponsorless, this one the final version. They look very, very similar, but this one does all the corporate activations. But yeah, there was a lot of bombast. If you've seen the presentation on YouTube or somewhere else, you will have noticed the choir singing and all that stuff, like this is the beginning, etc. And fair enough, clearly the corporate side of Audi and the marketing side of Audi has really shown out here. I wonder how we're going to feel about it come Melbourne if the cars are both out in Q1. Is this going to look a little silly? I don't know, maybe, but that's the world of F1 car launches, right? We have 11 of them, there's a lot of bombast, and then like 8 of them are disappointing come the first week.
I'm intrigued to know what it was like on the ground in terms of how the launch worked. I watched the stream. I wasn't super impressed. Quite a large amount of it seemed to be devoted to a load of people going up the stairs to move from one floor to another. Were you part of that throng who was going up the stairs?
I was part of yes, absolutely. I was part of the stairs walk, and in fact, I've now walked down the stairs. I'm going to let you in a little trade secret. I've done that walk multiple times today because obviously we've had a lot of preparatory stuff and extra media content that we're going to, extra media sessions that they're going to inform what we talk about in the coming few minutes of this podcast in a slightly saner environment than this.
I must admit, it did have a bit of the feel, particularly that phase, the going up the stairs bit, the waiting for the launch proper to start after the preamble they had downstairs. It felt a little bit kind of low-rent 1980s sci-fi movie, if you see what I mean. And I don't mean that in a good way.
Well, I mean, it is like, this is the type of venue. This is the power plant building. So it's, it's kind of part of I don't actually mind that bit at all. It's part of the German aesthetic. They want to make it very clear how serious Audi is about this investment, how proud it is that it is in Formula One now. And I think they wanted to show that off with bombast, even if they don't necessarily expect big results on the track right away. I mean, from all the conversation we've had here, it has been stressed again, over and over again, that, all the concerns about Audi's level of investment, level of excitement, level of commitment to F1, what we're being told is basically, you forget about those. Like, we're in this for the long haul, we're taking this very seriously, and we're ready to take some punches early on.
I wonder if the whole going up the stairs thing was just a visual metaphor for the long journey to the top of Formula One. It's going to be plenty of steps, it's going to take a while, and it's going to have a weird soundtrack. So that's what I'm taking from the launch. But it sounds like it was a little bit more convincing on the ground, though, even though it was very kind of corporate and there were no great revelations. And of course, it wasn't a real car. It kind of worked for you if you were there on the shop floor, as it were?
Look, I don't like launches as a concept. I don't like all the corporate language and stuff. It does feel overblown for what is a sports team doing 20 rounds. Ultimately, like the choir singing, this is the beginning. Well, this is the beginning of a sports team doing 20 races. 20 times on Sunday, 2024, we're going to see them line up and then do a bunch of laps and then go home. That's, I mean, you like that, audience. I like that. You like that, Ed. That's why we're here, and that's why we spend so much time talking about it. But it is also nice sometimes when there are people who can take a step back and go, but actually, this is it's just a sporting competition. It's very interesting. We like it. We spend a lot of time thinking about it, but maybe, I don't know, this kind of stuff is very political rally coded in a sense. That said, for an F1 team launch, because they all come with this outsized level of bombast, is all right. I think it's, I would, we're going to, trade secret, we're going to do a bit of launches ranked type of stuff on the website. I feel pretty good about this one. I like it's not without its shortcomings, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I hope that it's not on the podium by the end of things, or that will reflect a fairly disappointing launch season. But put it this way, in terms of launches ranked, you can nick a podium with a pretty low level of performance some years. So yeah, we'll see how that will play out. But of course, it's a big deal for Audi, isn't it? And they're playing on their ambition and the whole corporate thing. It's very Audi, isn't it? It felt quite kind of German manufacturer, which is no real surprise. But I must admit, I thought it was a little bit less that than the event that Scott Mitchell-Malm went to towards the end of last year, which had a lot of the old cars and that kind of thing. So I guess they perhaps played that card. And it was a little bit of a shame maybe that they didn't have a little bit more kind of technical content. I know that sounds weird, but they did their launch a couple of years ago in London, and it did have some sort of decent technical content, if you like, in it. Not a huge amount, but hey, it's a technical sport. Whenever they do surveys, fans love the technical side. Even if they're not actively engaged in it, they like to know the broad stories and the basic tales. So I almost feel like that was a little bit glossed over, but if they didn't have the car, I guess what could they do?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're completely right. They are sort of rationing out what they're revealing, and clearly we're still waiting for any signs of what the actual car is going to be, apart from the blurry shakedown shots. You mentioned the going heavy on old cars. I mean, I can see them right now when I look over. There's like 4 in a row: the DTM, the LMP one, the Audi Quattro. I'm not going to turn the camera around because that's going to break this whole rickety setup, and also just because you can go Google those cars if you so desire.
Is there a John Bincliffe BTCC car?
Let me have a look. No.
Disappointing.
No, that's not
disappointing for BTCC.
That's fans. Not a thing here. I have to be honest. If it was here, I would not know what it looks like. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a shame about the lack of the technical stuff, especially considering that this is basically the second Audi launch event. So that part's a little strange. And to see the car, you're going to have to basically, to see it properly, it's going to be the shakedown, the 5-day test in Barcelona, where Audi is going to be out on track right away, basically, because they want to know what's wrong, if anything's wrong, exactly as soon as possible, and to use those days to the fullest, because obviously everybody's under such a compact schedule. And the secrecy, I understand. It's also they don't have massive expectations for 2026, but that never does tend to correlate with more openness necessarily, does it? It's not like the teams that are the best are the most secretive, and the teams that don't expect to be so strong are the most open. It just tends to kind of randomize itself. And look, we're already noticing this launch season, and folks aren't forthcoming with details too much, because anything a few days in advance of somebody else can pay serious dividends in the early rounds, even if you were treating this season effectively as an installation season, as it is in Audi's case.
Yeah, very much means it's a drip feed of technical information and technical sight of the car. So we will see more of this car. We'll be able to do a proper technical analysis when we see it properly. There's just been a few distant photos and videos so far from when it ran. So as you said, this is just the start. They did have some non-public event stuff elsewhere earlier in the day. So we'll come back in a minute and talk about that. Well, those of you watching the video version of this podcast will notice that Val has changed locations, which sometimes happens when it comes to these launches. It's quite difficult to find a quiet corner, and you often get moved on. Yeah. So Val, we need to talk a little bit about Audi's messaging. Grand ambitions, a huge name to come into Formula One, but what are they saying is the aim for 26?
Yeah, it's sort of, it's a part of it that I think teams, and specifically like race teams, race personnel, don't like to talk about, but maybe the commercial or marketing or corporate people above them, that's sort of the terminology they speak in, right? It's, like your Q1, Q3, Q4 percent growth, etc., forecasts, all that kind of stuff. There's a little bit of mischief going on. Certainly, we heard from all the key figures today, and you could tell in the tone of Nico Hülkenberg specifically, who tends to be a certain way when he feels a topic is beneath him or not worth pontificating about. It was basically all of his answers about the competitive picture were like, just wait a week, and then just wait for the season opener, and just wait for all that kind of thing. But there is a certain picture forming for 2026 already in the minds of people, and of course the compression ratio thing is part of that. But Audi is in a different position to where even without it, it's very, very, very realistic, and maybe even it's now more realistic because of the compression ratio thing. But it's very realistic that it doesn't expect to be there punching with Mercedes, Ferrari, your established power unit manufacturers specifically in the early days from the outset. That's Mattia Binotto is very clear about that. I believe the word he's used was impossible, that it's just impossible to match them from the outset. And that is combined with the fact that many people, both outside of Audi, but also today in this launch event, have pointed to the expectation that initially this will be an engine formula. So maybe like matters of chassis are almost secondary in that regard, matters of even potentially driver performance, even despite how different these cars are set to be in terms of extracting performance. Now, Mattia Binotto was asked about expectations for Melbourne. And if you want to read into it a little bit, he said that basically the target was to finish and be somewhat competitive. So finish the weekend basically without any major reliability trouble. So I presume, just run the full race, but also not spend any extended time in the garage through the free practice sessions, I think. And what is somewhat competitive? Is somewhat competitive in the midfield? Is somewhat competitive just well clear of Cadillac, if Cadillac is where people expect it to be? I mean, that's only Mattia Binotto truly knows what he means by that. But they're certainly, for the outset, they are very much playing it down, which, it's fair enough. Again, it's a new power unit project. It's a team that hasn't been the strongest in recent years or ever, really, just due to the resources. There's a lot of excitement now over the structure being put in place, over the processes, over what I think has been described as pragmatism, and the expectation that, yes, we can go step by step. Yes, we can take it somewhat easy and be okay, like weather initial results that are just so, and to help that weathering process, I think they're playing the initial expectations down, which is fair enough. I'll just add, and he didn't really answer that, but I think it is interesting. We're going to talk about the whole Mission 2030 thing right now, which I'm quite surprised that they made such a prominent part of their launch event and just general speaking to the media and just general marketing, that that 2030 is the year to be, depending on who you speak to, either fighting for the championship or winning the championship. For one of the guys in the roster, Nico Hülkenberg, I mean, is he even going to be there in 2030? What is his primary role in there right now? Like, every F1 driver for me is an F1 because he's on a path to win the championship at some point or be in a position to fight for the championship. And I kind of asked Nico that, is like, does that timeline align with your timeline? And he didn't really answer. I think there's probably an unspoken understanding that, I mean, the guys who will be doing the winning, if the winning comes to it, will be, maybe Gabi, but probably not Nico.
What was interesting about that comments he made about the competitiveness for this year was that there's kind of two elements to it, aren't there? There's one, which is the fact Audi's new and going in against established competitors. But the other thing is he seemed to be quite strong on the compression ratio trick. Call it what you want, design, legitimate, loophole, however you want to characterise it, that Mercedes and Red Bull Ford have hit upon. So that seemed to be quite emphatic in terms of the advantage he felt that will give to the manufacturers.
Yep, absolutely. It's a little surprising in the sense that
But it's not surprising because I think we knew that Audi felt quite strongly about it, but you'd think that they would have maybe less urgency than some of the other ones, and we've not heard from some of the other ones. But yes, Mattia Binotto said that, like, he tried to play it down with, like, it's rumors what Mercedes has done. Obviously, he doesn't have a direct line to what Mercedes has done, and he's not going to divulge any secret information about what conversations have taken place with the FIA and what is on the agenda for the upcoming meeting on January 22nd, I believe, where they're going to be hashing some of this stuff out. But Mattia Binotto said that, yes, if the compression ratio rumors are accurate, then it is a considerable advantage. And Audi, they've probably definitely been agreed between themselves, which means Mattia Binotto and James Key, the technical director, that what they are going to say is that we trust the FIA to sort it, handle it in a specific way. But I mean, you can tell they're not happy. And I asked James Key, kind of, if it just happens this year and then it's sorted out for next year to where everybody's on a more level playing field, or whatever that exactly means, is that kind of okay for your timeline? Because you're not supposed to be ready this year to fight for the big things that you need to fight for anyway. And if you have that thing to fall on as the main reason for wherever you are in the competitive order, you kind of get to figure yourself out, maybe slightly outside of the limelight. That's not how they feel. They don't want a write-off season, is kind of how he put it. And they don't like the situation. They didn't go and outright say that their interpretation of the rules is that is not allowed. They didn't quite outright say that, like, there would be something to protest. I think Mattia Binotto was asked about protesting. He said you have to know what you're protesting. So, which implies that, as always in F1, we like to speak about black and white rules, but as always, the more important question is who understands what to mean what, and who will accept something down the line, or something in a different area, or something in the same area, what kind of compromise they will accept to understand it in a different way. That kind of thing. That's part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, and the best way to fight that battle is to do it off track, ultimately. And we have got the meeting coming up to tackle that particular one. But coming back to that horizon they've got, the 2030 objective, it's a strange one, isn't it? Part of me likes the fact they're not setting immediate targets.
Yeah.
Because I think Formula One teams, really, you should be saying, well, we want to push as hard as we can, be as competitive as we can, and keep getting better on every score. And if you keep doing that and you do it well, you will eventually get to the top. So that's positive from that side. But equally, the 5-year plan, it's a very sort of corporate battle plan, isn't it? And it seems fine now. But a few years down the line, if progress is not obvious, then it starts to become its own little pressure point. Whereas actually, often in the corporate world, today's 5-year plan doesn't matter because it's going to be replaced by another 5-year plan next year, and no one will really scrutinise it in that way.
Yeah, and I agree. I also think that ultimately, if you are to form a 5-year plan, it should, at the very least, like, doing it any sooner than Melbourne, for me, is like, until the car and the race team has hit the track in some capacity. I do think I don't want to be, and I know I'm slightly going in the defense of the big corporation or whatever, and the other ones. Like, I think Alpine Renault is, when we talk 5-year plan, when we don't think, Soviet construction, what we do think is Alpine Renault and what they were talking about their 5-year plan. And I know that you specifically and other people in this podcast have been quite ruthless in discussing that 5-year plan. It's been
well, they didn't even know, because they expressed it as a 100 race plan as well, and they disagreed on when it started.
That's fair. That's a fair thing to point out. But I also think we don't want to crack down too hard on race teams when they say that kind of thing, because ultimately, I think a lot of motorsport goes the other way, where they refuse to set any targets. They refuse to tell us of any expectation, in the fear of just showing up with egg on their face. Whereas for me, failure is part of sports. And I know, like, when you have a boardroom to answer to and you step in front of them and that was the agreed plan, and then the program's in trouble when you didn't hit those targets, then yeah, that's unfortunate. But for the sporting landscape, for the show part of it, if in 2030 Audi is here and not winning, or something else has happened, etc., I mean, that is part of sport. I don't think they will then deserve clowning on for this. I will say that, it is interesting that, the press elements that we got, there's a description of what they call as Mission 2030. I think maybe they've gone a little too too heavy on this one, right? I just want to read some of it out. Our goal is to win championships by 2030. So again, like we're quoting directly here. We have a structured plan for deliberate ascent. Our journey begins as a challenger, where we will establish our processes and fight for points. We will evolve into a competitor. The next phase is to become a champion. Off track, we aim to become a sporting icon. What I will say is that Mattia Binotto, when asked about that plan, said that we've always said the target is to fight for championships, not win championships, which is contradicted by this very press plan, which I suspect is the meeting of the sort of corporate language and corporate, planning versus the race team person who's used to racing, who I think fundamentally understands that for you to be the team that got it super right in 2030, 2029, whatever, 2031, 10 other teams have to fail. That's fundamentally part of F1. That's always what comes into those, 5-year targets. That was, I guess, maybe the problem with the 5-year Alpine Renault target. It wasn't just about growing Renault, Alpine, etc. It was about Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari not growing at the same pace, stumbling. That's, it's always, I don't think anybody should be that categorical about winning championships, because it's not that kind of sport. But I don't mind it. I'm fine with it. It's going to be funny to clown on, I guess, if it doesn't come to fruition. But okay, it's something, and it's a good thing. It's something, because I think in terms of like car design and technical specifics and stuff, we're not getting a ton today from the launch. So at least we're getting some more material around the team.
Yeah, the positive thing is that baked within that plan is just constant improvement on all fronts, which is what it's ultimately all about. Mm-hmm. And actually, this is a team that over the past year or so has become a lot more credible. They took a big step last year. Those trio of floor upgrades kind of in the middle of the season, starting in Spain, turned them into a proper decent midfielder and made it look like this is a team that's going somewhere. And also, they've really made a deliberate effort to be really well prepared. They've already run on their filming day, which was last week. And that's central to the strategy, isn't it? Making sure that they're ahead of the curve, despite some of the disruptions they had last year with accidents.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that, of course, is that, again, this is a new power unit by a new power unit manufacturer to Formula One. The primary goal of that shakedown was to make sure basically all the bits run. It was like, it was like a true shakedown, basically, is what it is. What we understand by shakedown isn't going to be a 5-day test. The shakedown is you put it on track to see that all the systems work, the numbers show up on the computer, the power unit can do enough laps without overheating, blowing up, etc. Whatever happens to it. If I understood correctly, they did 50 kilometers, I want to say. Again, sometimes it wasn't. I was not always close enough, and it's quite a place with a lot of talking going on. But yeah, I believe 50 kilometers, and it went reasonably well, and they're quite happy with the sound. But obviously, no early competitive picture, no anything like that, no early takeaway from the car. It's still all in an extremely basic shape. Again, this is the earliest shakedown anybody's had, and they had that planned for a long time. They had the plan as being the first full week of January, and I think they got right under the limit with that, because it must have been Friday, wasn't it? I don't know. I should have checked. But yeah,
well, the launch season all blends into just one lump of stuff for us. So yeah. Last week is close enough. I can't remember exactly which day it was. They know what day it is today. Totally it's fair. It's Audi launch day. That's how we count these things.
Yeah, but yeah, it's they sound optimistic about things generally without that necessarily translating into immediate results on track, which is also very nice. Again, you've spoken about the Sauber team taking a big step forward at the end of last year. That is true, but I mean, in the constructor standings, that still doesn't count for very much. Obviously, that whole class of teams stepped up very considerably. I mean, this has been cited already, but the fact that we had the worst team of the season mathematically confirmed with a round to spare, that's insane. That's actually, like, mathematically, that's crazy. And Sauber obviously played a primary part in that sort of statistical oddity, which shows that they've become credible. But they were always, for the level of resource, I've kind of felt they were always credible, and the people behind the project are credible. I mean, Mattia Binotto is very credible. Jonathan Wheatley is very credible, and I know James Key has had some splits from F1 teams in recent time, and I am definitely not the one to gauge his design prowess and look, oh, he's missed something there, etc. He's that good of a designer. But I mean, I think he's better than those splits suggest. Would be my hunch. I think that is a trio of very, very credible names that they've put forward here. Again, the power unit project and its newness is going to be a big question mark, but maybe the timelines align right there.
Yeah, so this year is going to all be about a solid start and maybe spring a few surprise results if they can. I'm sure they'll enjoy a repeat of that Silverstone podium from last year. So thanks very much, Val. I know you've got to get on and head off, and I'm sure we'll hear from you soon. I'm delighted to be joined by Scott Mitchell-Malm now, but before we get on to the Honda launch, Scott, just a quick reminder to everyone that we're currently running a 7-day free trial to the Race Members Club, which we like to think of as your paddock pass for F1 2026. There's all sorts of behind-the-scenes content, bonus podcasts and videos, ad-free environments, lots and lots of behind-the-scenes stuff with us. Scott, I don't know about you, but the thing I really enjoy about the Race Members Club is the thriving community. Very, very vocal, lots of chat going on there, constantly things going on there. That's been something of an unexpected success for the Race Members Club.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's almost like it's kind of the second coming of forums, really, but the good kind before they got overrun, much like other parts of the internet, which is actually one of the reasons why I'm surprised to hear you label that as one of the things you like most about it, given your known dislike for most forms of online discourse.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I'm not interacting on it, I do keep an eye on it and read it. And there's always lots of interesting ideas. And it helps shape our content as well. So, yeah, I would say if you want to have a taste of that, of joining that, that's one of the extra benefits on top of all the content.
Yes, it's very much sort of spawned its own kind of sort of subgenre of the members club. We've got you've got the F1 chat on there, MotoGP chat for people who are fans of two-wheel racing, all other racing's catered for as well. We're currently, Glenn Freeman for his sins is working through the madness of a Bring Back V10's management game that he decided to launch. That's descended into anarchy because a bunch of people who didn't pre-qualify for that have formed their own breakaway series, and that's spawned back-to-back press conferences and announcements. So it's all kicking off over there. Good-natured, but serious undertones. That's just the kind of stuff that's going on there, almost on a not quite minute-by-minute basis, but there's always something going on, which is awesome because it's kind of, as I say, generating its own conversations. And I think really fostering community is a really good word for it because it is genuinely like that. And I think among fans, among members, I think they share that kind of view that it's a safe space. You don't have to agree all the time, but it's a safe space to kind of share your opinions and disagree in a respectful way.
Yeah, and it's essential to find spaces like that in the internet, not just related to motorsport, but almost anything. So yeah, if you'd like a little bit of a taste of that community, sign up to our 7-day free trial. Click the link in the episode description or head to Patreon and search for The Race or The Race Members Club and you'll find out more there. Let's move on to this event now, Scott. It was in Tokyo, Aston Martin and Honda, a presentation of their partnership as it was put. Lawrence Stroll was there, Stefano Domenicali, Koji Watanabe, the president of HRC, the Honda Racing Corporation. Toshihiro Mibe, the Honda president, was there as well. Quite a noisy event, I think it's safe to say, but they did have the new RA626H power unit there, the Honda power unit. So it's nice to see that.
It was, yeah. Did you learn that, or did you have it written down?
I did have the code number written down. I did have to glance at it, as I haven't quite committed it to memory as. And we don't often use the type numbers for the power unit, so I thought it was worth throwing in.
It's a bit more complex than Red Bull's first engine, isn't it? The DMO1. No, it was. It's really nice to see it because we got that kind of augmented reality at the Red Bull Ford powertrains part of the Ford Racing and Red Bull launches last week. But to actually have a physical engine there on stage, put out some pictures of it as well, gave it more of a. I mean, it felt, even though we weren't there seeing it in person, we couldn't reach out and touch it. It felt more real than the augmented reality version because there's a lot more substance to it. You could see kind of certain elements of it, the enhanced size of the battery pack and the control electronics, for example, the fact that the MG UK, which is now a lot bigger for this year because of the fact that it's all gone towards 50-50 internal combustion and electric power split. The MG UK is now outside of the crank casing itself, so it's at the back of the engine. You can see it. It's swapped sides, so you can see it a bit more clearly. So it's just it's kind of putting into reality and putting before our eyes the things that we often talk about and you refer to by name or by acronym, because this is F1 and F1 absolutely loves that technical jargon. So I really, really enjoyed that, particularly intrigued by the fact that they felt the need to blur parts of it out and only show one side of the engine properly clearly. But yeah, it was it gave it a sense of being an actual launch, even if it was for an engine, which is obviously something I don't think we've ever had that before, certainly not in my time covering F1. There was a brief period where F1 and the FAA wanted to put the engines on display and do some technical presentations with them, but that was in season and using older units. So the reveal of an actual new engine felt like breaking new ground.
Yeah, I'd say the F1 manufacturers as a group aren't very good at showcasing the power units. Mercedes is probably the exception. They have done some good stuff. Everybody else seems to do it under duress. So it was nice to see something. There's not a great deal of conclusions you can draw from it. And of course, the real magic is in terms of the technology you can't see and how that all works, all the combustion technology, the batteries, the battery efficiency is going to be very, very important. So it doesn't really tell us a huge amount about the Honda power unit itself, other than it's nice to see it. They did have a Q&A with journalists who were there. Compression ratios, that came up, of course, with Red Bull powertrains and in particular Mercedes having found that compression ratio trick. So what did Honda say about that?
Very, very little. They clearly don't want to. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and as I understand it, Honda has been one of the more vocal manufacturers in terms of pushing for a resolution and answers on it. So it doesn't surprise me that they didn't want to say too much. So in addition to so Andy Cowell, the Aston Martin Chief Strategy Officer, is his job now, I think. He was there as well. He and Mibe both fielded the questions about the compression ratio, and Mibe sort of said that Honda's got its own things that it wants to clarify from the FA. It's got its own ideas about what to do. And I wonder, because I remember having this experience with Honda before, and this was obviously in the previous iteration of the program. So this would have been back when the likes of Toyoharu Tanabe was the technical director. Masashi Yamamoto was running the program. And I remember them saying that one of the things that they'd kind of learned with Red Bull was to kind of push more with the FIA and kind of query things and run their own interpretations past the FIA. Like basically start to, I mean, Honda doesn't like to believe in grey areas. That's just the way it is as a company, but very much push the understanding, what they thought was white actually might be black. So they might be able to do this or whatever. And I got a bit of that impression from Mibe when he talked about having their own interpretations to run past the FIA, because it felt very much like, well, if the rules aren't basically going to be applied in the way that we think, and they can do this, well, then maybe we can reimagine this rule and maybe we can do that. And I'd be interested to know exactly what it is they're going to be speaking to the FIA about. But that was basically as far as he went, as both Mibe and Cal said it's ultimately an FIA issue. Cal did say that ultimately you've got to push the boundaries as an engine manufacturer, and the rules are what they are. So every team is going to be trying to do that. But it was kind of a stating the obvious response. They effectively dodged it. There's a meeting this week. I think it's a couple of days from now as we record this. So we have to wait and see exactly sort of what outcome they get behind the scenes. We know that Honda's not satisfied, but they didn't really want to be drawn on it too much. I was just quite pleased that the question got asked. Yeah,
that was something. And it's no surprise the answer was very, very cautious, because to be honest, this event was pretty rubbish in terms of the actual amount of substance, I would say. Normally, I'm an inveterate note taker. I write down a lot of stuff in my big notebook, partly because I've then got it for reference, and partly because if you write stuff down, often neurologically, that means you're more likely to take it in. But I've only got 17 lines from a 1 hour thing, and that's unprecedented for me in terms of how little there is. I mean, I've got like 3 pages from the Red Bull thing, and that wasn't super dense, but it was better. So that tells you a little bit about the depth that was on offer. But did you draw any hints in terms of performance from the messaging they'd chosen?
Not particularly. We know that there's been some difficulties. They've been playing catch up from the very start. Won't go over that in too much detail again, but because this project only really got put on full attack really in early 2023, that meant that there was a decent amount of time had passed when they could have been developing and weren't. That's because even though Honda was still, its engines were still being used by the Red Bull teams, Honda itself had rediverted human resources, technical resources elsewhere. So they've played catch up where they can. They've basically cut corners, makes it sound like they've not done a good enough job, but they have tried to streamline the process as much as possible. The suggestions are that they've basically run out of time to get everything done to the level that they would have wanted to do. I'm not 100% sure whether that's across internal combustion engine, the energy recovery side, or both. There's different things we've heard at different times about where the battery's at, whether they've missed a trick on the combustion side. Let's wait and see. I have heard some whispers about performance and reliability not quite being there, and there were some quotes that I think must have been said in separate Japanese media sessions around the event itself, where Honda's senior people, I forget his first name, Kakuda, who is on the technical side of HRC. So Watanabe is usually the spokesperson, but Kakuda speaks as well, and he's much more involved on the tech side. And I think he said basically they've done all they can on the combustion engine, but it's a matter of time, which is kind of a hint of what I've said before, I think. There's challenges, there's issues to resolve, but that's also always the way, I think, for all manufacturers this time of year. Watanabe, I think it was, did say that they're currently on a very short time frame to do the work that they want to do on the dyno, reliability-wise, before running on track. Again, that fits with something I've heard about, sort of the state that they might be in there. So I don't have huge hopes or expectations for Honda for this season, but that's partly because I have been saying and fearing for a couple of years now that they were on the back foot for this new set of rules.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, they've got is it's a change of not just the fuel type, the fuel supply. It's now with Aramco, so the ExxonMobil before, and the ExxonMobil fuel they had in that Honda power unit before was working really, really well. Internally, they reckon that gave them an edge over what Petronas was giving to Mercedes. So that's changed. So that's another big question as well. Stefano Domenicali, as I mentioned, was inevitably there. Like latest part of his world tour, he was at the Ford Red Bull event the other day in Detroit. Now he's in.
He was at the
Tokyo.
Audi livery. He was at the Audi livery event late last year as well. Certainly was a big, was a big important guest there in the media stuff they were doing in advance. So you're right, he's everywhere all at once.
Racking up the air miles, but also it shows how important a market Japan is considered to be, isn't it? And there was a little bit of talk about Japanese drivers, what with the fact that Yuki Tsunoda's not on the grid, so there's no Japanese driver on the grid. And we know how much Honda likes its Japanese drivers.
Yes, exactly. So it was no surprise to hear Domenicali jumping in on the questions about the Japanese driver side and the promotion of Japan in Formula One. Big emphasis from pretty much everybody who spoke about it, about how just sort of the broad general F1 excitement levels for this season will be good for Japan, but I didn't feel there was a huge amount of substance to what everybody wanted to kind of get across in terms of what can actually be done in Japan without a driver. And I think that's because the answer is very little. Honda doing well helps, but they're not a team. They're much less, a Honda-backed driver. So it's kind of hard, really, to build that relationship in the same way. The Japanese Grand Prix, I'm sure, will be an absolutely awesome event. Again, it always is, but it's only once over the course of the entire season. So, yeah, I think they do need a driver. The only problem is if you believe Lawrence Stroll, Aston Martin's already got an amazing young driver program that's going to basically be putting loads of drivers everywhere. So you've got those ahead of any Japanese drivers that could potentially come in, but I don't see them doing what Red Bull did, which was genuinely take on quite a lot of Honda proteges and give them really good opportunities outside of Japan. So I'm not really sure what progress they can make on that. The only thing we haven't talked about from the event, I think, Ed, that made it onto my list of notes was obviously Honda's got a slightly different logo. I think that was announced a few days ago. But I love it when these events happen because there's so much, so much of it's scripted. They get hardly any open questions in at the end and then they don't answer them. And everything's always got such a sort of forced kind of corporate element to the point of it just can fly over your head. It's so boring. But are you massively excited about the new Honda logo and everything it stands for, about their commitment to this new initiative?
Well, they've gone from the familiar Honda H to a familiar Honda H. So It's fine. I'm not very excited about logos. I've got no problem with people who are. That's fine. But obviously they're trying to think about the branding, and obviously they talked about the fact that HRC, they're doing some HRC kind of hot hatch style road cars as well.
That's more interesting. That's more interesting. But I don't see that becoming this big thing where HRC suddenly becomes like a sub brand in itself. It's not going to be like M for BMW or anything like that, is it? It's going to take a while for that to take off.
No, exactly. That's just one of the things they want to try and tie it to the racing side, which makes sense. And they talked a lot about the two pillars of their motorsport involvement, which is driving technology and, of course, developing personnel, which they're very, very keen on. That's extremely important to Honda. So, as I've said, really, absolutely nothing actually was said that you couldn't have written down. I think if you'd gone into, say, ChatGPT, one of those other large language models, and asked them to produce what these people might say at the launch of a Honda engine, I think you'd get something pretty much like this, because it's all by rote. That's the nature of these events. Sometimes I've on previous podcasts defended the launch events because they do give you little bits and pieces of information. I would say this was fine, but it didn't really say much, to be quite honest.
No, it didn't really move the needle. The most interesting thing about it was the thing that wasn't there, which was the fact that you had this bit of the engine they want to hide. So that's both in terms of the way it's positioned on the stage. They only put one proper photograph of the engine out. Then they posted a few more on social media, which was showed the other side of the engine with part of the lower assembly blurred out. Now, I find it really funny to have done that in terms of the imagery for an event that was about unveiling the engine. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't disguise it and then be surprised that people are asking or pointing out that you've disguised it. You can't put on a massive engine launch event and then be surprised that people are like, well, why isn't there more assets? Aren't there more assets of the engine? So I'm just quite curious about that. I don't know if it's going to be a red herring. I don't know if it's something really interesting about the way that the 26 engines are, or the Honda in particular. The most outrageous theory I had while we were trying to work it out was because the MG UK is now in this new position, and it just sort of sits a bit weirdly, especially the way the images are all dark and shadowy. I, at one stage, wondered if the MG UK was kind of just sat there just so it was on display so you could see it, because it's usually on the other side of the engine, you can't see it, and they wanted to show it off. And then when you're showing that side of the image, that side of the engine in the other images, maybe that's all blurred out because that's where the MG UK would normally be, and they don't want to show the bit that's behind the MG UK or something like that. I don't think that's what's happened, but I like that we've been given a little bit of almost like car-esque launch intrigue, because there's something that they don't want us to see, and that just makes me want to see it all the more.
Absolutely. Well, that's what it's all about, isn't it? I imagine that there's some legitimate reason for them doing it rather than just for a bit of fun, because I don't see Honda as the ones who do that just for mischief. I know some F1 teams might do that just because they can and it's amusing, but presumably there is some detail there. But at least it's a glimpse at the power unit. It's worth having a look at. If nothing else, even if you are not remotely interested in engines, just to see the size of the battery and control electronics, which is taking up a lot of space. So it just gives you an idea what's under the skin with these new engines. So if nothing else, it at least gave us that. So thanks very much, Scott, for joining us to talk about that. Thanks very much to Val Khorounzhiy for joining us earlier from Berlin. And stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.